No kidding.
So what time does it start? What time should I be here?
Yeah, seriously.
8:45.
Good evening. Today we are learning Maseches Yevamos Daf Nun Beis, and as well we'll carry over onto Nun Gimel Amud Aleph as we prepare for Shabbos. We're starting on the very, very last line of Nun Aleph Amud Beis as we analyze what is to date the hardest Mishnah in the Masechta, and that's the Mishnah that opened up our parak on Daf Nun, the parak of Rabban Gamliel. On the very last line, the Gemara says, Ketzad asa maimer. Now, if you were to flip back to the Mishnah on Nun Amud Aleph, you might recall that the first 5 or 6 lines of the Mishnah quoted a machlokes Rabban Gamliel Chachamim, and then the Gemara said Ketzad. Now, normally in the flow of a sentence, when you say, how does this work? Says the Gemara, top of Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Well, when you said Ketzad, are you asking, hi get, achar get, who? Are you asking about the machlokes between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, no. Hachi kamar, this is really what's going on. Get, achar get, umaymar, achar maymar, keda amra, that's the machlokes that we have listed in our Mishnah between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim as is. Now, what was missing in our Mishnah? Yavam echad, yavama achas, Ketzad hitartan. If you have one yavam and one yavama, that's what the word Ketzad is coming to teach us as to how to be matir the woman in that particular case. That is what Ketzad meant. And says the Gemara, what's the answer? That asa maimer bi'avim tov and asa laget tzricha himenu chalitza. That the chalitza will help in a case where there was maimer bi'avim tov and there was also a get. You still need chalitza. That brings us to the 2 dots, 6 lines down, 5 lines down. Nun Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, quoting our Mishnah, asa maimer uva'al harezeh kimitzvasa. We had said in our Mishnah at the beginning of the parak that if a man, let's say Shimon is going to marry the wife of Reuven after Reuven dies, he does maimer and then they are intimate. They consummate the yibum marriage. So our Mishnah had said, Harezu kimitzvasa. So it says the Gemara, Lema Misayeh le Rav Huna. Maybe this is exactly the same as the sheet of Rav Huna, because the Amar Rav Huna mitzvahs yevama nekadesh v'achar kach bo'el. The appropriate way to get married to a yevama is first to be mekadesh, what we would call maimer, and then to have tashmish amita. So says the Gemara, not necessarily. Ema, what should it say? Af zeh kimitzvasa. Our Mishnah should say, this is even a mitzvah. Says the Gemara, what do you mean this is even a mitzvah? It's maimer followed by tashmish amita. It's the perfect model of yibum. So says the Gemara pshita. Says the Gemara, not so simple. Salkadai techamina. I might have thought as follows. Kevan de Omar Mar haosa maimer biavimto parcha himenu zikas yavamin. That once a person does maimer to his yavama, parcha himenu zikas yavamin, the zika, the tethering from the yavam and the yavama is now severed, and v'chala alav zikas erusin v'nisuin, and now that they're halachically engaged with this kiddushin derabanan of maimer, now he is begeder, she is begeder erusin v'nisuin. Then maybe I would have thought that when they're intimate by the tashmish amita, by the beila, ema lav mitzvah kabi, they're not fulfilling the mitzvah of yibum because the tethering of the Zika was severed with the Maimer, in that now they're actually married. The Zika has been superseded by an engagement. So maybe then the mitzvah of Yibum is done. So says the Gemara, Kamash Malan, that's not true. Kamash Malan, that even after Maimer, while it's true that the Zika is no longer a regular Zika and they are talking in the categories of Erison, still the mitzvah of Yibum is fulfilled by having Tashmish Amita. Now let's analyze this particular sheet of Rav Huna here in the Gemara, quarter of the way down. Gufa. Amar Rav Huna. Mitzvahs Yevamin Mekadesh v'achar kach bo'el. When it comes to the mitzvah of Yevamin, Rav Huna was of the opinion that the ideal way to perform this mitzvah is to be Mekadesh. Shimon would be Mekadesh Rachel, v'achar kach bo'el, then they would be together. V'im ba'al v'asa maimer kana. Now, if it was reversed, if they first had tashmish amita and then the maimer was done, which is out of order, that's not the way we do things. So then kana. Im ba'al va'asa maimer pshita, says the Gemara, for sure that should work to hakanya b'bia. We know that the bia does work. We've said in our Masechta that even ba'al korcha, that they're allowed to be together, fine. So says the Gemara, that case should be obvious. Ella, says the Gemara, Ema, what should we say? Im ba'al below maimer kana. Says the Gemara, if there's tashmish amita without maimer, then there is a kinyan, just one episode of tashmish amita without maimer. Says the Gemara, some brises don't like that, but Tanya loke. Some brises say that if there is such a case where there's tashmish amita without maimer, so then there should be malkos. Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. However, the malkos are makas mardus midrabanan. Makas mardus is a din in the Gemara. It's a din in the Gemara when we refer to malkos that are given by the Chachamim. It's not malkos that are midoraisa, like Maseches malkos. It's not like that. It's rabbinic lashes, and that is based on the following: the Rav, the Amora Rav, Mangid, he would give lashes to all of the following categories of people. Man de mekadesh bebia. We know, of course, from the Maseches Kedushin that a person can get married with kesef, shtar, and bia. So kesef would be that a man gives a woman an item that is worth a shava pruta, just a few cents, and he says, "Hared mikudeshes li whatever b'tabaz." Do with it. If it's a ring and you hand it to her, that's a kesef. Shtar. We'll learn a little bit about this today. If you write a shtar that I would like to be engaged to, hared mikudeshes li b'shtar zu kedas Moshe Yisrael. And the third way is through bia. Now, while it's true that technically speaking, a marriage can be consummated through bia alone, however, Rav would give out rabbinic lashes for that. Man de mekadesh bebia, it's not considered an appropriate way to do things. There should be a flow of events where first there is erusin, first there's engagement, after that there is bia. Where else did he give lashes? Uman de mekadesh beshuka, a person who would get kiddushin beshuka. Rashi is about 12 lines down. Aman de mekadesh beshuka, ve'afilu bekasba. Even if it was with money, de minhag zilusu pritzusi. You don't get engaged in the shuk. What if you're on camera at the Bulls game and all the shot? Is that a lack of pritzus? So the Gemara seems to say that that's not the right way to do halachic erusin. Halachic erusin should be done in an appropriate setting. What's unique is that when we do erusin under a chuppah, it's in front of hundreds of people. There were 500 plus people at my wedding, and they all watched me do the act of erusin. Everybody was standing there. So that's not a lack of tznius. It's talking about bishuk when you're like out and about. And we're not, to be clear, I'm not talking about like American engagements, like on one day. That's a halachically irrelevant, though emotionally quite relevant. A halachically irrelevant moment as it relates to that's a zero.
That's two different things. Minhag zilus and pritzus. Zilus is in the shuk, with screaming, with whatever. It wouldn't be a design when you got, I don't know, whatever hotel you got married in, even though there were 500 people. It's not minhag zilus. Certainly not minhag.
Yeah. You're saying zilus is different than pritzus.
Yeah.
What's zilus?
Cheap. Like seriously, in the street, you're getting engaged in. You're doing kedushin in the street.
That's
is that
great.
Not what zilus means?
No, you're absolutely right. Zilus or mizalzel.
Or zilzol or zol.
I was thinking more mizalzel, but you're right. And either way, in my brain, I didn't parse out those two words. I'm like, it's the same sugya, it's pritzus, but you're right, Rashi doesn't do that. So there has to be a diuk there. That's correct. Right. Either way, it's not appropriate. And Rav would serve some lashes to those who would do that. Uman de mekadesh below shiduche, someone who would get married, there would be mekadesh betrothal. They would do kiddushin without having shiduchim. What does that mean? All the negotiations, all of the bartering to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Uman de mevatel gita, a person who cancels a get after he sends it out. Uman de meisar moda gita, and someone who puts out a bad message about a get because it confuses as to whether or not the get was chal. Uman de pakir shlicha derabanan, and if there is a man who mistreats a shliach of Bezdin, he would also get lashes. Uman, if there was a man who was deshahi shamta derabanan alitlas in Yomin, he had been in excommunication for 30 days, velo asi lebeidina v'tava l'shamte, and he did not come to Bezdin in order to get rid of his, what's wrong with you? Like you can't get an aliyah, whatever all the limitations are. It's not right. Why do you not care? Come here, we're giving you lashes. You should care about being, Bezdin's not happy with you. You got to come and say you're sorry, whatever the appropriate halachic terminology is. And last but not least, Ve'al chasna, for a son-in-law, the da'ir bebei chamohi, who lives in the home of his mother-in-law. Now, just on this last little line, the Gemara asks a question: did da'ir in the chalif? No. If you're living in the house, that's when there's a problem. But the chalif, if you're just stopping by the mother-in-law's house for a while, for dinner, so then that's totally fine. That's not true. There was a particular man who went to go visit the home of his mother-in-law, the Nagde Rav Sheshes, and he got lashes from Rav Sheshes. So if you're looking to not go to the home of your mother-in-law, you can quote this Gemara, Maseches Yevamos daf nun beis. But the Gemara here says that's not really correct. The reason why in that case Rav Sheshes gave out lashes was because Ahu meidam havadayim mechamse. There was actually something going on between the son and the son-in-law and the mother-in-law. Rashi highlights this. Rashi is about a third of the way down. Dibra hamaschal meidam havadayma chamse mine. Rashi says chashuda haisa chamoso mimenu. There was something between them. She was chashuda. It doesn't say he was chashuda. It says she was. I don't know, why does Rashi say chashuda? Okay, so that was the case of Rav Sheshes, is that she was chashuda. Anyways, let's continue analyzing Rav. The Gemara says halfway down a little bit more. Nahar doe amre bekulhu lo man gid Rav. Really, Rav did not give lashes in all of these cases. Elo lemekadesh bebia ubelo shiduchi. He would only give lashes if somebody got kiddushin through bia, or if they got kiddushin without the shidduchim, without all the conversations that needed to take place, even in shidduche, nami mishum pritzusa, because it's a lack of tznius to not have all of these things worked out. So that's what the Gemara says. We're at a new brisa. The brisa is just about 2/3 of the way down, almost 2/3 of the way down. Tanu Rabbanan. Ketzad Maimer. We are 52 blot into this Masechta. We've learned the word Maimer, I'm just guessing, 1,000 times. And we've never learned what Maimer looks like. We know that Maimer is Kedushin Derabanan. We know what Kedushin Deraisa looks like. Harat Mikudeshesli. Then you're married, and to the point that if you get divorced and you wanted to marry a Kohen, you're done. You're out. So the Ketzad Maimer, you're late to the party. Now, one thing to remember about Shas is that Shas is not organized like a table of contents. We're like, first we will give you all the fundamentals of, we're going to give you a book on Zika. We're going to give you a book on whatever. It's not like that. It's not like that. We're going to give you a book on stretching your brain to think about families that should never have existed or interacted. We don't do any of that. The Gemara learns straight through. But part of that is on us. Had we known Mishnayos Baal Peh, this would have been much easier. Much, much easier. But anyways, the Gemara is saying 50 blot into the Masechta. How do we do Maimer? So the Gemara says, Nasan la kesef o shvei kesef. You give her actual money or something that is the equivalent of money. Uvishtar ketzad. How would we do shtar in this particular case? The Gemara interrupts the brisa and says, "Bishtar ketzad? What are you talking about? We know the answer to that question. Kidei Amran, like it says in Maseches Kiddushin, because we're supposed to know Mishnayos by heart. What does it say over there? Kasavla al haniyar o al hacheres. If a man writes down his Kiddushin wishes on a piece of paper or on a piece of pottery, afal pi she'ein bo shava pruta hareat mikudeshesli. Even if it's not going to be worth a shava pruta, it doesn't need to have monetary value. Unlike kesef, if a person's going to get kiddushin through kesef, what you give has to be valuable enough. If you give an American penny to a woman and say haret mikudeshes li b'penny zu kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, you're not married because it's not a shava pruta. However, if you write a shtar that's worth 1 penny and on it says haret mikudeshes li and she accepts it in front of Edom, they're married. So that's what it means, bishtar. So Amar Abaye, what does it mean, ketzad shtar? The Gemara says, Amar Abaye, haki kamar shtar, ksuvas yivam. We're not talking about Kiddushin. When the Mishnah is talking about a shtar, it wasn't talking about Kiddushin. That we already know how to do because we would do this shtar Kiddushin the same way we would do any other shtar Kiddushin. For this one for a Yevama, the same way we would do for a regular woman who's getting married for the first time in a regular way. So then when it says bishtar ketzad in regards to this brisa, it wasn't asking about Kiddushin, it was asking about the ksuba. So ketzad, what's the answer to this question? Says the Gemara, kasavla. This is what the ksuba would say for a woman who is a Yevama. Ana ploni bar ploni. I am Ploni, the son of Ploni. Kabilis yas plonis yevimti alai. I accept this woman who is my Yevama upon me. Lazun, to feed her. Ulafarnasa, and to clothe her, to give her money, whatever the case may be. Karoi, in a way that is appropriate. Ubilvad, however, this ksuba has to have a halachic tie to the property of the initial husband when there's yibum. We've learned this already, that the din is that when the ksuba is given over to the Yevama, it comes with a lien of sorts on the property of the first husband, in this case, Ruvain. If in fact the first husband had no property, then for the sake of the Yavam, he doesn't have a choice. Takinu le Rabbanan nisheni. The second husband, Shimon, would be obligated to create some type of financial lien on the ksuba, so that it's not such a simple decision to get divorced, because if you give this up, you're obviously giving up a piece of property, right? So we had to make it so that there were some teeth to the ksuba. Otherwise, it's too easy to divorce a woman. The Gemara says about 12 lines or so from the bottom of the page. Abaye says to Rabba, Nosan la get, if a man gives a woman a get, the Omar, and he says, Hareat migureshes heimeni, you are divorced from me. V'i at muteres l'chol adam. You're also not allowed to marry anybody else. A little bit of a strange get. Mahu, what's the din? Take a look at Rashi, who explains the question. So Rashi says, Nasan la get, or about 15 lines, 20 lines from the bottom of Rashi's, 3/4 of the way down. Nasan la get yavam li yevimto, not a regular marriage. If a yavam gives a get to a yevimto, and then he puts a condition on her that you're not allowed to marry other people, Rashi says, Mahu. Mahu leposla, what is the din to make this Yevama, who just got a get, forbidden al echav ve'alav, to marry his brothers or him ever again? Behai gita, the tekum ale below yivne. We've learned about this before, that once a Yavam severs the zika tie between him and the Yevama, once he is not fulfilling the mitzvah of Yivne to build his brother's home, and he chooses lo Yivne, then he's not allowed to marry her again. But does that rule expand to his brothers as well? If he puts into the get, I am not allowing, we are getting divorced, and you're also not marrying any of the brothers. So this, says the Gemara, is as follows. Here are the two sides. We do know that get Yevama is derabanan. Now, do we say as follows? Get de mahani be'eshes ish, mahani be'yevama. We know that a regular get, not a yibum get, but a regular get by a regular woman, we know that that works. And therefore, we assume that a get would work over here. But a get to lo mahani be'eshes ish, if there is a get that wouldn't work for a regular woman, lo mahani be'yavama, would it then not work with a yavama? O dilma, or would we say asi li'ichlufe begita? Or we say, no, that's really not true. We have to say that it works here. Otherwise, people will get confused about the various types of get. So the Gemara responds on the last short line, though there are some aforshim who say that this line should not be here. It was added by some of the later achronim, like the Maharshal, and the Maharshal wasn't a late achron. The Maharshal was around in the times of Maharshal was around in the times of the Beis Yosef. I think they had an ongoing battle with one another. Anyways, it was added within the last 600-700 years. So some say that this line really doesn't belong here. But really, the Gemara does conclude, we are concerned. So the Gemara asks a question on this. If you're concerned about what the appearances are, so what if I just take a blank piece of paper, Maskifla Rabba Bar Chanan, Elamayat, if what you're saying is true, Yoivla Niara Be'alma, I go into my printer, I take out a blank piece of paper, and I hand it to my wife in front of a room of people, and I say, we're done. So that's not a get. There's nothing on there. So it says the Gemara, Hachinami de Pasla. So here you're saying that we forbid her. That's crazy. Of course that doesn't work. So it says the Gemara, Amar le Hasam lo pasul bekahuna. Over there, that get is a zero. There's no text on it at all. That's not a get. It's a piece of paper. You can't ruin someone's ability to marry a Kohen with a blank piece of paper. But hacha over here in our case, where the get really does have teeth, kapasil bekahuna. Titania, what does the Brisa say? The isha grusha me isha. This is mapike. Me isha means from her husband. Lo yikachu. He cannot take. Afilu lo niskarsha. Elami isha. Even if he's only divorced from his own wife, lo yikachu. He cannot remarry her. V'hainu, this is what we mean when we say reach haget sheposel bekahuna. The smell or the scent of the get can forbid kahuna. In other words, because there's a risk of misunderstanding this get, we therefore don't allow this woman to remarry her husband who is a Kohen. Omar Rami Bar Chama on the last two lines. Hare Amru, the Chachamim told us, Omar echad l'lavlar. If a person says to a scribe, to a sofer, a lavlar is a scribe, he says the following: you're a professional get writer. You knock on the door to the office. You go in. Hello, how can I help you? You're the lavlar. I want you to write a get for me so I can give it to my wife. Kasuv get la arusasi. I'm only betrothed. I'm only engaged. I'm not fully married. I want you to write a get to my betrothed, I guess wife, kind of half wife. Licheshe echnesena agarshena. Such that if and when we get married, once we consummate our marriage, we'll instantly be divorced. So it's a conditional get. The get says, right now we're halachically engaged. Erisin took place. I already did the harat mekudeshesli. And then I say, hey, I want to make a deal that once we get married and are intimate, we're instantly divorced. Says the Gemara, there's halachic teeth to that, hareze get. Why? Because in theory, he could have divorced her right now because they're already partially married. Because it's possible for him to divorce her now. So therefore, the conditional get also works. Masha'ein kain, that's not true as we turn to the top of Nun Beis and Beis in the following case. Uliisha be'alma, if there's a regular woman, namely, we haven't even had erusin and nothing yet. You're not engaged yet. You're dating. You're not even dating. She's a random woman in the bar. Doesn't matter. So uliisha be'alma ain get. This particular case, if I said, I'm not engaged to anyone, but I want you to write a get. I met this woman, Penina, and I want you to write a get that when we get married, the cheshech nasena, that we're going to be divorced, as the Gemara, ain get. Why? Because at this moment, you're not engaged to anyone, and therefore you can't get divorced. And the Gemara says that get is considered to be unreasonable. By Rami Bar Chama, let's bring this general case of the conditional get into our world of Yibum. Liyavimto mai. What would happen if a man gave over his conditional get to a Yevama, but there was no mimer yet. So says Gemara, Kevan de Agidabe. Is it that there's already an ego, they're already connected to one another because of Zika? No mimer, just natural Zika from the fact that she's a Yevama. But Kevan de Agidabe, therefore Ka'arusaso Damya, and therefore because she's like an Arusa and she could in theory get a get, then the conditional get of when we get married, I want to be divorced applies to her. O Dilma, or perhaps Kevan Delo Avad B'Maimer Lo, because the Zika, because the mimer was not yet done, then this conditional get would not yet take place. We don't know the answer to that. So basically what the Gemara is saying in a deeper lamdus is as follows. Do we compare engagement by a regular woman to Zika of a Yevama? And the Gemara is unsure what the actual comparison is between those two things. So I'm not a Yavam, and if I were to just get engaged to a random woman, so is that the same type of connection as a Yevama to her Yavam without mimer, just with Zika? Okay, let's get into more lumdus about Zika. The Gemara says 4 lines down on Nun Beis Mud Beis. Boy Rav Chananya, Kosav get lezikaso v'lo ma'amaro. Let's say that a person wants to divorce his wife from the Zika that is present, but not from mimer that was done. Could you do that? Could you separate Zika from mimer? Zika is that automatic halachic tether that exists. When Ruvain dies and Rachel falls to Shimon, even without any conversation, if Ruvain dies in his sleep, nobody knows he's dead yet. Instantaneously, without any insertion of human beings, Rachel and Shimon have Zika. Can you divorce Zika? Can you separate it? That's the Gemara's question. So says the Gemara, can we have a scenario where kasav get lezikaso v'lo l'ma'amaro or l'ma'amaro v'lo lezikaso mahu? Do we say maimer ilui zika karami v'havale kimegarish chatzi isha, that maimer is really Zika, and if you're going to do that, maimer and Zika are inextricably bound, and therefore if you divorce one, it's like divorcing half of a woman, because maimer and Zika are 2 peas in a pod, they can't be separated. Or perhaps, no, really, Zika and Maimer are 2 different parallel entities. The Gemara says, why don't we learn this from Rava? V'tisha le'mi de Rava. What did Rava say? To Amar Rava, 10 lines down, Nun Beis Mud Beis, Nasan get lema'amaro hutra tzarasa. If you give a get to a woman who had Maimer, then the tzara is allowed to marry. What happened to the Zika? So it says the Gemara, it's obvious that when he did the get on the Maimer, he also severed the Zika. So maybe we can learn from Rava that these 2 things are connected. Says the Gemara, no, the Rava pshitale, it's great that he knew the answer, but the Rav Chananya, mi baile. Rav Chananya didn't know the answer to this question, and he didn't understand Rava shita. So the Gemara says, my teiku, we don't know the answer to that question either. Third of the way down at the 2 dots on Nun Beis Mud Beis, the Gemara says, Chalatz ve'asa maimer. We had said that if a man does chalitza, and that's followed up by a maimer. This, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, that in the case of chalatz ve'asa maimer, and then the Mishnah concludes that ein bo klum, that there's nothing that really counts in this case. Whose shita is this? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, zo divrei Rabbi Akiva. What is shitas Rabbi Akiva? The Amar, he says, ein kiddushin tofsin b'chai ve'lavin. He says that there is no kiddushin that works when someone has a status of chayvei lavin. What does that mean? That once a man does chalitza, the woman's a chalutza, and to marry a chalutza is usher, that's chayvei lavin. And because a chalutza is b'chayvei lavin, therefore, maimer doesn't work on her, according to Rabbi Akiva. That's why maybe our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva, because our Mishnah says chalatz v'asa maimer, that the maimer was a 0. Because the chalutza is the geder chayvei lavin. It's an iser doraisa to marry that person. And therefore, according to Rabbi Akiva, no maimer would work, no kedushin would work. Says the Gemara, finishing up the brisa, aval, chachamim omrim yesh achar chalitza klum. The machlokas, the chachamim don't agree with Rabbi Akiva. Says the Gemara, that's not simple. Umi matzis mukmis laki Rabbi Akiva. Is it really possible to say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva? After all, vaktani reisha, what does it say later in our Mishnah at the beginning of the parak? Nasan get ve'osa maimer tzricha get v'chalitza. That if there was a get and there was maimer, oh, wait, there was a get first, which should have ended the relationship, making her a chalutza, and it was followed by maimer. So says the Gemara, our Mishnah had said, tzricha get b'chalitza, that she needs chalitza again, which means that the maimer counted. Vi Rabbi Akiva, if you're going to say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, then the next line doesn't work, because what does the next line teach us? Kevan the yavla get, mi mahani ba maimer. According to Rabbi Akiva, There's a case in our Mishnah that doesn't fit for his shita, and that is the case of get followed by mimer. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Minayin lenosim get liyavimto, shene'esra alav olamis. We know that Rabbi Akiva holds a sharp line on this, that in the event that a man gave a get to a Yevama that he's never allowed to marry her again, Shenemar lo yuchal ba'alah harishon asher shilcha asher shiluach. Once you've sent her out, she's done. So we know that Rabbi Akiva holds that once a get is in place, no mimer should help. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva can't be the author of our Mishnah, because while we were able to align his shita with one part of our Mishnah, but another part of our Mishnah is exactly in his face, it doesn't work at all. Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that once the zika is severed, you cannot do anything else that works. No mimer, you cannot marry her. It doesn't even work. It doesn't even start. It's a zero. So our Mishnah cannot be him. So Amar Avashi, that's not true. Get Yevamin midrabanan ukras machtaba alma. The case that you're quoting from in our Mishnah where Rabbi Akiva doesn't match, that's the case where a get was followed by mimer. That's only true midrabanan. But midoraisa, if there was a get, there should be mimer, and therefore we need another chalitza. So it's really not a stira, and really it is possible that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara brings a raya to this. Halfway down on Nun Beis Mid Beis, the Gemara says, Tanya Nami Hachi. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Nasi writes, Ein hadvarim halalu amurim ela l'divrei Rabbi Akiva. All of this, our Mishnah does not clear what he's talking about, but all of this, all of the Mari Makomos that we've seen, they all work according to Rabbi Akiva. Because what is Rabbi Akiva's hard and fast rule? Shaya ose chalutza ke'erva. That once a woman is begeder chalutza, she's an erva. I don't care what you do afterwards. You want to halachically find your sister, your harad mekudeshesli, you're not able to do that. That doesn't work halachically. No mechanism to make that work. Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion that once a woman is a chalutza, nothing else can work on her. That relationship is gone. You've lost the opportunity. So therefore, that works perfectly with our Mishnah. Aval, the Brisa quotes, Chachamim omrim yesh achar chalitza klum, that there is, the Chachamim argue, they say that there is what that can be done after chalitza. What does Rabbi Yehuda Nasi say? Va'ani omer emasai. When does this apply? Bisman shekitcha l'shum ishus. When you get married for the sake of being married, I understand. Aval kitcha l'shum yevamos. When the Chachamim say that she actually got married for the sake of yibum, then ein achar chalitza klum. They agree. They agree. So we saw that our Mishnah can be according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And if we were to paskin like him, that would mean that once a man makes a woman into a chalutza, there's no way to ever repair that relationship. It's over. There's no way to get married ever again, because a chalutza, in the language of the Brisa, chalutza ke'erva. A chalutza is like she's like a sister that you're just not allowed to marry. We're 2/3 of the way down. We're going to learn a Brisa. The Brisa has 6 explanations in it because it's not such a simple language. We're going to do that. It'll wrap around till about 1/3 of the way down. We'll learn a little bit more. We're going to learn until about 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Let's continue. Hopefully we'll get there. Says the Gemara, Tanya Idach, another Brisa. Hacholetz liyavimto, a man did chalitza, the chazar v'kitsha, and then he walked over to her and said, Harad mekudesh esli. So we just saw Rabbi Akiva doesn't like that. So Rabbi Akiva is not in this brisa, so it doesn't matter. Rabbi Omer, im kitcha l'shum ishu, so this brisa matches what we saw before about Rabbi. If in fact the reason why they were getting married was l'shum ishu, tzricha hemenu get, but l'shum yivmos, if the reason why he did the kiddushin that they got engaged was because of yivmos, because of yibum, ein tzarich tzricha hemenu get. It was a 0, it doesn't count. They don't need to get, it doesn't count at all. We don't care why they got married. They say that the kiddushin after the chalitza is valid. Now, Amar Rav Yosef, my time in the Rebbe. What is the reason why Rebbe makes his distinction between l'shem kiddushin, kiddushin l'shem ishus, and kiddushin l'shem yivmos? So answer number 1 is like this. Asauha, we made their relationship ke'oder b'nichse hager, like a person who is tilling the ground in the properties of a ger, because savur shelohin. However, he thought it was his land, de lo kani. The rule is like this: if there is a ger and he passes away, the way that his land is given away is first come, first served. It doesn't fall back to his non-Jewish parents. He's a ger. So that's not how it works. Any yid who goes in there, it's like squatters, whatever it's called, squatters rule. Something like squatters' rights. Yeah, first come, first serve. I'm taking that land. That's how it works by a ger. Now I'm standing in this guy's property. The ger died. I'm standing there with a shovel, and I'm just kind of moving some dirt around. But I think it's my property. I didn't realize I was on the other side of the property line. Does that count? Says Gemara Delo Kani, and therefore that's similar to our case over here. She's a Yevama. She's really not shaykh to you, so you're not married. They're not married. That's Shitas Rebbe. So says the Gemara, no. Amarle Abaye mi dami. These two cases are not comparable at all. Hasam, when you're standing in your neighbor's yard, thinking that it's yours, lo kamechavin lemikne. You have zero intent of acquiring anything. You think you're in your yard. Okay, you don't have a fence up, so you don't know what's what, but you think you're in your yard. But hacha, over here by the Yevama, you walked over to her and said, Hared mikudesh esli v'tabasu kedas Moshe b'Yisrael, hacha kamechavin lemikne. These two cases are not comparable. Therefore, it says the Gemara, Hello, Damya Ella. Really, our case is more comparable to a case of leoder benichse ger zeh uchsavar shel ger acher hu dekani. I thought I was in ger number one's field, and really I was in ger number two's field. That would be more comparable to our case. Either way, answer number one is rejected. Let's move on to answer number two. Elamar Abaye hacha b'mayaskin. On what is the case of this brisa? Kigon da amar la hiskadshi li b'maymar yevamin. I want to get engaged to you with Maimar Yevamin, with the Dirabanan marriage to a Yevama. Rebbe Savar, Maimar Ilui Zika Karami, Maimar evokes Zika, V'asa Chalitza, Afkaase Zika, but she already did Chalitza. So it doesn't work. So now you can't get married and you ruin the Zika. No, each of these are two separate activities. And because that's true, you're still allowed to get married. Meikara, the Chachamim say, Ilu Amar La Hiskachili b'Maimar Yevamim Milo Mahani. The Chachamim argue that this would have worked under all circumstances. Hashtanami Mahani. The Chachamim clearly hold that the Zika was not perfectly severed when the Chalitza took place. That's answer number two. Answer number three, 4 lines from the bottom, Nun Beis Nun Beis. Rava Amar. If what was going on here is that he got engaged to her with the Maimar Derabanan of Maimar Yevamin, so then Kuli Amalo Pligi de Mahanya. Even Rebbe would agree that would work. And what's the machlokas over here? I want to get engaged to you not with Maimar, but with something totally new, which is Zikas Yevamin, which is kind of riding the wave of the existing relationship of Zika. So says the Gemara, that's where we have our machlokas. Rebbe Savar, as we turn to the top of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, Yesh Zika, there was Zika, V'asai Chalitza Afka Asei Lezika, but then you did Chalitza and it ruined it, so now you can't get married one way or the other, even if it's a Zika Sivamin. V'Rabbanan Sabre ain't Zika, and therefore you are all well and good. What's their argument? Second line, this would have worked before, and therefore they say Hashtanami Mahani. They hold that there's no reason to not allow them to remarry. But there's another answer still. Rav Shiravya Amar, he is the fourth answer. He says, Bechalitza Kshera, when we're talking about a Chalitza Kshera, let's remember the terminologies of Chalitza Kshera and Chalitza Psula. Chalitza Kshera is when a person does Chalitza when there is also an opportunity to do Yibum. That's called Chalitza Kshera. A Chalitza Psula is when your hand is forced. You must do Chalitza, but it would be usher for you to sleep with her, so you cannot do Yibum. That's called Chalitza Psula. So let's go back in the Gemara. Rav Shravi Amar, by Chalitza Psula, where you either could have done Yibum or Chalitza, everyone agrees that by Zikas Yevamin that would not work as a marriage if it was a case of Chalitza Kshera. Says the Gemara, the machlokes is in regards to a case where Chalitza was done where Yibum wasn't even an option. Mar savar Chalitza Psula poteres. According to Rebbe, if Chalitza Psula was done, a Chalitza where no Yibum was possible, it still is poteres. It still severs the Zika. Umar savar, the other sheet of the Chacham hold Chalitza Psula ain't a poteres. No, it doesn't. That doesn't passel anything, and therefore you can still get married. Answer number 5. Rav Ashi Amar de Kule Alma, you're wrong. He says to Rav Shravi, you're wrong. De Kule Alma Chalitza Psula ain't a poteres. Everyone agrees that a Chalitza where Yibum wasn't possible, that's not going to solve any problems. V'hacha b'yesh t'nai b'chalitza kamiflage. As to whether or not if you put a condition into the chalitza, if that works. Says the Gemara, Mar Savar yesh t'nai b'chalitza, you're allowed. Well, that's Rebbe. Umar Savar ain't t'nai b'chalitza, you're not allowed. Ravina says the final answer, Amar dekuli alma yesh t'nai b'chalitza. Everyone agrees that a t'nai works. V'hacha b't'nai kaful kamiflage. We're talking about a double t'nai. A double t'nai works like this: on the condition that X, but then you have to explicitly say the other way, and also on condition that not Y. You have to say both sides. That's what the Gemara says. But Tanai Kafel Gemiflik and Mar Savar Ba'inan Tanai Kafel, Mar Savar Lo Ba'inan Tanai Kafel. So 6 different ways to understand this brisa and Shitas, the Machlokas, Rebbe, and the Chachamim. Let's learn a couple more very small pieces. The Gemara says 1/3 of the way down on Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. The Gemara says Cholatz Vasa Maimer V'Nosan Get Uva'al. We had said that in such a case that Ein Achar Chalitza Klum. Our Mishnah said that this was a nothing. Anything after Chalitza doesn't count. Says the Gemara, V'nisnei Nami, why doesn't our Mishnah also teach Ein Achar Bia Klum? Because Bia is similar in a way in its effect to Chalitza. Bia and Chalitza are the Doraisa activities. Get and Maimer are the Derabanan activities. So we should also include Bia in the same category as we do Chalitza, which is that once it happens, nothing afterwards should matter in this dynamic. So Abai v'Rava D'Amrei Tarvayu, they both agree. Tani, you should say in our Mishnah, Ein Achar Bia Klum. You're right, it should be there. Why didn't it talk about Bia? Because V'Tana Didan Hitarta Yevama L'Shuka Difale. Because it's a bigger chiddush. The Chalitza case is a bigger chiddush because you're freeing someone up to get married in the shuk. That's a bigger deal. So we spoke more in our Mishnah about the case of Chalitza than we did about the case of Bia. Says the Gemara, Echad Yevama Achas Echad. Echad Yevama Achas, Echad Shtei Yevamos, whether or not we're talking about 1 Yevama or 2 Yevamos, but that's what our Mishnah said. But if our Mishnah says that, the reason it said it was because of the following. It's to exclude our Mishnah from the possibility of it having been authored by Ben Azai. It must be that Masnisin Deloke Ben Azai. The Tanya, what does Ben Azai say? The exact opposite of our Mishnah. Ben Azai Omer, Yesh Maimer Achar Maimer, B'Shnei Yevamin, V'Yevama Achas. When do we say in our Mishnah that Yesh Maimer Achar Maimer? That's when there's 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi, and 1 Yevama falls to them. So Ruvain dies, leaving Rachel to both Shimon and Levi. In that case, we have our case. Ve'ein Maimer Achar Maimer b'shtei Yevamos. We have a mechad. However, there isn't Maimer Achar Maimer with 2 Yevamos and 1 Yavam. So that's clearly not like our Mishnah, which said that the halacha is same in both cases. Ben Azai distinguishes between the 2 cases. Next case, Ketzad. The case of Maimer Lezu, there we said that Maimer Lezu v'chalitza Lezu. Says the Gemara, Lema Misayeh, maybe our Mishnah is a support l'Shmuel. What does Shmuel say? Damar Shmuel, Chalatz l'baylas Maimer. If you do chalitza to a woman who had Maimer, lo niftarat tzarasa. That's not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that after the chalitza, there's nothing. Here, after the chalitza, we see that the Maimer actually worked. There's something still going on. There's still some kind of zika left over. Not only that, but v'tiyufta de Rav Yosef, by virtue of the fact that our Mishnah says you can do chalitza to one and what was the other one? Chalitza to one and Maimer to the other without distinguishing. V'tiyufta de Rav Yosef. If you'll recall, Rabbi Yosef had that line about the May bor. Don't pour out the water. What was he talking about? That if you have to do chalitza and yibum, you always pick a woman who's already a surah to a kohen to do the chalitza. Why would you ruin the pool and take another woman and invalidate her from being able to marry a kohen? Says the Gemara that neither of those sheets are true because miktani choletz. It doesn't say what you should do lichatchila. Do it now. Choletz in the present tense. Chalat is past tense. It's all b'di'evet. Chalatz ktani, and that is b'di'evet. 3 more short sugyas. Get lezu v'get lezu. Our Mishnah spoke about that. Lema misayele. Maybe this sheet in the Gemara supports the Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. The Amar Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. Chalitza psula tzricha lachzer al kol ha'achin. Our Mishnah didn't say that way. Here, the sheet of Rav Huna was that chalitza psula. If chalitza was done when yibum wasn't a possibility, then you need to do chalitza for all of the brothers. It says the Gemara, no. When our Mishnah says my tzrichos in the plural, it didn't mean tzrichos like all of them. It just meant tzrichos in general, da'alma. So therefore, not a raya to Rav Huna. Then the Gemara says 3/4 of the way down, get lezu v'chalatz lezu, maybe b'sayela l'shmuel v'tavet yuf to Rav Yosef, like we saw earlier. Maybe this is a support for the shita of Shmuel that lo niftarat tzara in regards to the case of Maimer, and to Rav Yosef, who is of the opinion that we have to be careful that when we do chalitza, that the chalitza goes to a woman who is already psula to a kohen, so we don't ruin the pool for kohanim. Says the Gemara, same answer, miktani choletz. Nope, it doesn't say it in the present tense, which would have implied the chatchila, but rather it says it in the past tense. Chalatz, you already did it. Chalatz ktani, it's past tense, and therefore diavad. Last little sugya, and then we will stop for the night. If he was chalatz v'chalatz, or if he was chalatz and did another activity, ein achar chalitza klum. That's what our Mishnah had said. Says the Gemara, as we saw before, but listening nami ein achar bia klum. We asked it before. We should say it again. And every time, if you're saying chalitza twice, you should say bia twice, because both chalitza and bia are the doraisa ways to conclude this relationship. Abai v'Rava agreed. Amar tavar tani ein achar bia klum. It should say it here as well. But Tana didan. The reason why our Mishnah didn't say it was because atar yevama l'shuk adifa le. It's better to speak about a case of yevama l'shuk. There's more of a chiddush there than in the case of the bia. Therefore, that case was taught. Our Mishnah spoke about the case of ein achar chalitza klum, but not about ein achar bia klum. We'll stop right here and pick up on Shabbos, 8 lines or so from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.